ADAPT. And this is the program that that it's likely the majority of people will go through. ADAPT is focusing entirely on adaptive leadership practices, and it is all about exercising adaptive leadership, regardless of your role, regardless of the sorts of work that you're doing and the challenges that you face. You'll almost certainly be dealing with some adaptive challenges. The challenges, as Catherine mentioned, that are the hard things, the uncomfortable things, the things that make us very skilled in finding ways of avoiding them, but that we need to address, where we need to work across organizational silos, whether it might be competing incentives for trying to find a better way of doing things. The classic example is heart. Just of that adaptive challenge is the heart disease patient, where after you've had your triple bypass and you've had the surgery, and Catherine made the analogy to surgery and psychiatry, but we see through research that most people who have heart surgery and who are told and receive briefings and know exactly what they need to do to avoid heart disease returning, they don't do it. They don't change the habits. And despite being told and having the rationally knowing what's good for them, they don't change because much of what's happening in the system is very, very difficult for them to change. Changing the habits of a lifetime, changing the way they live, the patterns of behavior in terms of interaction with others, how they eat, how they exercise, those sorts of things. Those are very difficult to change. And that's a classic adaptive challenge. Doing that, changing that sort of thing is really, really hard. And that's what ADAPT is all about. It involves learning the behaviors, the techniques, questioning mindsets in ways that sometimes seem counterintuitive. And importantly, it recognizes that learning really happens not when we're comfortable, not when we're kind of feeling quite satisfied with ourselves and we're cruising along. Learning really happens, the important learning really happens when we're under some pressure and when we've got a bit of a struggle. And that connects with, and Catherine referenced the adult mind development input that we get from our colleagues in Harvard about helping you deal with complexity, the unknown, the uncertain, with ambiguity and apparent contradictions. So the learning experience itself can often feel, particularly in the early stages, maybe the first one workshop or possibly into the second workshop, there'd be times when people going through the ADAPT program are thinking, I'm not really sure what we're doing, or, oh my goodness, that was so frustrating. And because it is frankly going to be quite a struggle in places. We know and we're confident that that will contribute to both very rich learning, but also a very a consolidated and the development of those adaptive leadership practices that you will then have the opportunity to put into practice through the program and later when we get to the stretch program. We just have a look at the ADAPT structure itself? It's longer than Enable. It's over 12 weeks. It has 3 significant workshops, and there are between the workshops, there are facilitated check-ins where you are and work really, and again, where you're putting adaptive leadership practices, experimenting with them in the workplace, applying them to the adaptive challenges that you face yourselves, and learning both as a group and individually through peer learning groups. The program starts with that self and system workshop, looking at how we use comfort and discomfort in our learning zones, what authority means and how we work with authority and leadership, how we work within systems, the systems that we are part of as individuals, and the whole defense system and the relationship between the individual and the system. And very importantly, distinguishing the difference between technical challenges where, yeah, the knowledge exists, we know it exists, and we'll probably be able to do something about it, even if it is quite tricky. And adaptive challenges where nobody has the right answer, and we're going to have to work together to find it. And which is a key role of the adaptive leadership, is facilitating the work of the people involved to make that change happen. Workshop 2, more practical about the adaptive practices, diagnosing the system, mobilizing the system, getting the adaptive work happening, putting some heat into that system, and orchestrating sometimes the conflict that sometimes needs to happen when you've got multiple stakeholders, multiple factions, multiple constituencies, and getting that working. And importantly, calibrating that to what is sometimes, an environment where the chain of command is really important. So sometimes, how do you have a difficult conversation without, being insubordinate or without creating issues? How do you exercise adaptive leadership in a way that works in your part of defense? There are then the application of that in the workplace and the opportunity to apply it to your own adaptive challenges, get feedback on how that's going in the check-in, and particularly using your group with an adaptive case consultation process, which you're taught and get to practice in workshop 2. And then through to workshop 3, which is all about leading and learning through action, more on mobilizing and people to do the work on adaptive challenges, looking after yourself because adaptive work isn't easy, and preparing for how can you continue to sustain adaptive leadership ongoing. Again, the support of your manager throughout this, particularly with adaptive leadership work, is really can't be overestimated, because it can seem extremely, sometimes it can seem perplexing, it can seem difficult, and also you're looking to create change in the workplace, and sometimes and working with stakeholders like your manager and other leaders is so critical to make that happen.